The question is that this House do now adjourn. Mr. Conor Burns.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is a pleasure to rise to address the House in this adjournment debate. It is some 4 years and 2 weeks since I stood in this exact same place and made my maiden speech in an adjournment debate on the issue of student visas, and I was very pleased on that occasion to make significant progress with the government afterwards. I hope the same will be the case today. It is the Department for Culture, Media and Sport who are responding. My right honourable friend the Minister is in his place. I'd like to trespass briefly on my time to say this is not a debate about the government's energy policy, it's not a debate about the government's renewable policy. Those are debates for another day. This is a debate about this particular proposal to build a wind farm off the coast of Dorset, and it is appropriate that we meet today when councillors from members across the House are enjoying the LGA conference in Bournemouth and enjoying the stunning views on that wonderful conference facility. I have recently done a survey on this wind farm, a small sample of which I have with me, and it is showing overwhelming opposition for very good reasons from my constituents and others. In this debate, I want to discuss and address the potential impact of the Navitus Bay wind farm on England's only natural World Heritage Site, the Jurassic Coast, which was designated by the government and UNESCO as a World Heritage Site in 2001. This status, under Article 4 of the World Heritage Convention of 1972, obliges the government to protect, conserve, present and transmit to future generations the sites identified as being part of its cultural and natural heritage. However, a proposal for a wind farm of up to 194 turbines, each of up to 200 metres in height, is currently before the Planning Inspectorate for evaluation. It will be sited within full view of the Jurassic Coast and its main visitor centre at Dalston Castle. As part of the planning process for this proposal, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport submitted to UNESCO an environmental impact assessment. It is UNESCO and the International Union for Conservation of Nature's response to this environmental impact assessment that I wish to address this evening. In their comments on the environmental impact assessment submitted by the Department, the IUCN raised a number of concerns about the potential impact of the proposed wind farm on the Jurassic Coast World Heritage Site, in particular regarding the unique processes that shape the Jurassic Coast and contribute to its outstanding universal value. It is this outstanding universal value, if this outstanding universal value is compromised and the natural erosion processes on the coast are affected, the reason for the site's designation as a World Heritage Site would be threatened. The IUCN notes too the potential for the proposal to affect the protection and management of the property. They state that, quote, in particular, the adequate protection of the wider setting of the property, recognised by the World Heritage Committee to justify at the time of inscription the lack of a defined buffer zone, will be compromised. As such, the IUCN has said that any potential impacts from this project on the natural property are in contradiction to the overarching principle of the World Heritage Convention as stipulated in Article 4, as the completion of the project would result in the property being presented and transmitted to future generations in a form that is significantly different from what was there at the time of inscription and until today. The first of a number of direct questions I would like to put to the Minister is this. What is his response to the IUCN's conclusions, and how will the government meet its obligations under the Convention to protect the setting of the site, as well as its listed outstanding universal values? Madam Deputy Speaker, UNESCO does not make hollow threats. In 2001, there were plans to site 3 wind farm development 10.5 miles from the shore near Mont Saint-Michel in Brittany. As this threatened the setting of the World Heritage Site, the French government acted to exclude wind farms from a buffer zone around the site. They were right to do so, as UNESCO is not afraid of removing a site's designated status. The Elbe Valley in Germany was removed from the list of World Heritage Sites in 2009, following the construction of a 4-lane bridge in the valley, which UNESCO deemed the property failed to keep its outstanding universal value as inscribed. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, my colleagues would not expect me to say this, but my second question to the Minister is, will the Minister follow the example of the French and take action in England to protect the setting of our only natural World Heritage Site for future generations, thus avoiding the fate that befell the Germans? I believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, that if the Jurassic Coast were to lose its designated status as a World Heritage Site, the tourism economy throughout Dorset would suffer drastically. Over 30 million trips are made to Dorset in the last year, 5 million or so which included the Jurassic Coast. And evidence suggests that numbers have increased since the Jurassic Coast designation as a World Heritage Site. Given, Madam Deputy Speaker, that Navitus Bay's own research shows that 48% of people visiting the area cite the sea view as a reason for doing so, and that the IUCN, quote, considers that the impact of the project on the visitor's experience and appreciation of the property in its wider natural setting is likely to be significant, it is by no means a leap of the imagination to say the proposed wind farm will have a significant impact on tourism numbers. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. The fact that there are many Dorset MPs in this chamber today show that we fully support the compelling case you're making. My constituents are very worried about this proposal and the impact it will have on the local economy.
I entirely agree with my honourable friend, and I salute his dogged determination in opposition to this plan, and indeed that of my honourable friend, the member for Christchurch behind me, and my honourable friend, the member for South Dorset. And our honourable friend, the member for Bournemouth East, would be with us today, except that he's on manoeuvres on Salisbury Plain in his TA activities. My honourable friend and neighbour in Poole knows the vital impact to Bournemouth and to the conurbation. Bournemouth tourism is Bournemouth's second most important sector of the economy after financial services, worth something like £475 million to the town annually. It directly supports 8,500 local jobs, with a further 2,000 jobs indirectly dependent on visitors. Across Dorset as a whole, tourism is worth in the region of 1.7 billion annually and supports somewhere in the region of 47,000 jobs. However, as 20% of the summer visitors surveyed by Navitus, by the development company themselves, said they would be unlikely to visit Bournemouth during the 5-year construction phase, and 14% of summer visitors said they would be unlikely ever to return if the development was visible from the coast, it would have a major impact on our tourism economy and change the nature of our town and conurbation. Therefore, can I ask the Minister another direct question? Given the importance of tourism to Bournemouth and Dorset's economy, and the government's commitment to our long-term economic plan, that's another thing I expect my colleagues would expect me to say, what steps will the Minister take to ensure that this damaging proposal does not go ahead? I give way to my honourable friend for South Dorset.
I congratulate my honourable friend for getting this debate and fighting this cause, as we all are. Does he agree with me? What's surprising is that it's not as if there's nowhere else to locate this wind farm. There are 8 other sites identified by Crown Estates, totaling about 22,500 square kilometres, that would be nowhere near the land and certainly wouldn't damage this fantastic site. Why on earth were they put here, and why did Crown Estate choose this most precious site that we've tried to protect?
I entirely agree with the point my honourable friend is making. And of course, my honourable friend will remember in our initial meetings with the development company, when they were given a vast area of development area that they could put this wind farm in, we said to them that if it was not going to be visible from the shore, if it would not have the visual impact that could deter visitors and damage the World Heritage Site, we would not oppose it. All they needed to do was push it further out within the area that the Crown Estate gave them. That they did not do. I would like to turn now to some of the criticisms of the submission process, in particular starting with the independence of the environmental impact assessment. I agree with the IUCN that it would have been more appropriate for the Department for Culture, Media and Sport to have commissioned an independent environmental impact assessment rather than using one prepared by the proponents of the scheme, the Navitus Bay Development Company. In their words, this raises questions on the credibility and objectivity of that assessment. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have heard some of the arguments made by Navitus Bay to discredit the International Union for Conservation of Nature's comments, such as that the comments were merely interim and are not aligned with other impact assessments. Could this perhaps be because other impact assessments have been provided or commissioned by Navitus Bay themselves? Is it a case of we're right because the documents we have written say so? Then there is the question of the appropriateness of the guidance used. The IUCN also notes that the guidance used by Navitus for its assessment was not the most appropriate possible. Rather than using the IUCN World Heritage Advice Note, Environmental Assessment, Navitus Bay used the International Council on Monuments and Sites Guidance on Heritage Impact Assessments for Cultural World Heritage Properties, which is adapted to cultural heritage. This, according to the IUCN, is despite being aware of the IUCN guidance, which is referred to in the Environmental Impact Assessment. The IUCN has claimed that by adopting the other guidance, rather than the IUCN advice note, Navitus Bay failed to adhere to all 8 World Heritage Impact Assessment principles. Notably, the IUCN believes that Navitus Bay failed to adhere to the principle that, quote, reasonable alternatives to the proposal must be identified and assessed, with the aim of recommending the most sustainable option to decision makers, including, crucially, the possibility of the no project option. Can I ask the Minister, why did the DCMS not commission an independent environmental assessment? Can I ask him, fifthly, did the Minister or any other of his colleagues within the department, either currently serving or previously serving, approve the letter to UNESCO of the 17th of February sent by Leila Al-Qassani, the DCMS head of World Heritage, that takes for granted the evidence provided by Navitus Bay regarding the impact of the proposal on the Jurassic Coast, whilst dismissing the concerns of others, among others, the steering group for the World Heritage Site itself? And sixthly, given these criticisms, does the Minister have confidence in the environmental impact assessment submitted by his department, but created by the Navitus Bay Development Company?
Well, my honourable friend,
I'm
very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way and congratulate him on bringing forward this very important debate. Does he share my concern that the Department of Culture, Media and Sport did not issue a formal response to the UNESCO letter of the 2nd of May? That letter contained some very powerful arguments. Surely those arguments merited a response from my honourable friend. Instead, what has happened, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that letter has been passed apparently to the planning authorities as part of a process. That's an answer I got on the 23rd of June from my honourable friend. Is that not most unsatisfactory?
My honourable friend for Christchurch makes a very, very important and very valid intervention in this debate. And that was one of the reasons why I attempted to secure this debate, so that the Minister will have the opportunity on behalf of the Department to explain the thinking of the Department. And I think for the Minister to explain to the House that this is not simply a matter for the Department for Energy and Climate Change. This is not simply a matter for the Planning Inspector in Bristol. This is a matter for the Department for Culture, Media and Sport as well, who have a vital, indeed legally binding obligation to protect and do all that they can to protect that World Heritage Site and, as it says, to pass it on intact to future generations. So I look forward to the Minister's response, which he will be giving in a moment. I conclude as I began. This is not about the government's energy policy, it's not about renewable, it's not about subsidy. Those are debates which honourable members have different views on. This is about a proposal that my constituents and those of my honourable friends fundamentally believe is the wrong proposal in the wrong place. A proposal whose demerits vastly outweigh its merits. The government can achieve all its energy ambitions and still say no to this particular application. And this is an opportunity now for my right honourable friend, the Minister of State, to tell us what he is prepared to do to assist us. And it's not just us in Dorset. This potentially, as it will develop, will affect members in Hampshire as well. I noticed my right honourable friend, the member for New Forest on the front bench. As the energy would come in and the New Forest would be torn up to allow the energy to get into the grid. This is a very serious thing, and I say it without exaggeration, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think it is possibly the most significant issue that has come forward in Bournemouth, in the conurbation, and indeed in Dorset more widely in a generation. And I hope my right honourable friend in his reply can give us some assurance and give our constituents some assurance that he is with us and will do what he can to protect this fantastic bit of England.
Minister.
I'm grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the chance to respond to my honourable friend for Bournemouth West. May I begin by thanking him for promoting me to a Minister of State ahead of the reshuffle, and I hope the whip in the chamber will pass on that particular recommendation. He also mentioned the LGA conference in Bournemouth, and may I use that opportunity to pay tribute to Sir Merrick Cockell, who of course is standing down as the chairman of the LGA conference. He's been a fine servant to the LGA as well as to the Council of Kensington and Chelsea. Let me respond to the very pertinent points that my honourable friend has put about the Jurassic Coast and the World Heritage Site and the potential impact of the Navitus Bay development. And it is important, I think, to note that several colleagues are in the chamber, the Honourable Member for Dorset South, the Honourable Member for Poole, the Honourable Member for Christchurch, and of course the whip I mentioned earlier, the Honourable Member, Right Honourable Member for the New Forest, who may well wish to involve himself in this debate in the future, given what my honourable friend said about the potential impact of these wind turbines on his own constituency. As I said, my honourable friend has made a number of very important points, and let me try and deal with them as effectively as I can. He made 6 direct questions to me, and I shall try to answer them in the course of my remarks. And let me start, first of all, with the letter from Kishore Rao from the International Union for Conservation of Nature. I think it is important to state and really to set a framework around my remarks, Madam Deputy Speaker, that there is a process to be gone through in considering the planning application of Navitus Bay, and that approach is effectively a quasi-judicial approach, and one's personal opinion necessarily comes second to the opinion of experts and indeed to the process that is being gone through. So to start with the IUCN letter, let me make it absolutely clear that the IUCN, the letter was from the IUCN, and the IUCN is an advisory body to UNESCO. It advises on natural heritage sites, but it is not UNESCO itself. So that letter is not the opinion of UNESCO on the World Heritage status of the Jurassic Coast. The proposed wind farm development has not, to date, been examined by the World Heritage Committee, and so there is no official view of the World Heritage Committee nor of UNESCO as an organisation on the potential impact of the Navitus Bay site on the World Heritage Site. The current position, in fact, is that the World Heritage property is not considered by UNESCO to be currently under threat and is not in immediate danger of losing its World Heritage status. Now, my department, Department of Culture, Media and Sport, which has been mentioned by my honourable friend in his remarks, does have the responsibility to act as the UK state party on all World Heritage matters, and its responsibility is also to liaise with the UNESCO World Heritage Centre. The IUCN submitted their comments to UNESCO, and it was then our responsibility to forward those, and these were then forwarded on to us on the 2nd of May at the DCMS. It is then our responsibility not to respond to the IUCN, but to forward to ensure that the IUCN's comments are made aware, the planning inspector is made aware of the IUCN's comments. And we passed on the IUCN's comments to the planning inspector on the 7th of May. Now, the IUCN letter did refer to the effect of the wind farm on the World Heritage property and its setting. And these will be taken into account, these views will be taken into account by the planning inspector alongside the views of English Heritage, a statutory consultee. Yes, of course, I will give way to my honourable member from Christchurch.
Is it not correct, however, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, is it not correct, however, that the letter that came in on the 2nd of May was deliberately sent in advance of the decision of the government to refer this to the planning inspectorate? And what the letter was urging and indeed pleading with the government to do was not to refer it to the planning inspectorate because it hadn't passed the first hurdle.
That's not my, as I say, it's not the IUCN's role to say whether or not it should be passed on to the planning inspector, but that's not my reading of the letter, but I'll reread it again and double check the point made by my honourable friend and respond to him in a letter if I have to. But as I say, it is our responsibility to pass that letter on to the planning inspector to take account of the views of the IUCN. Just as I was saying, it is the responsibility of the planning inspector to take account of the views of English Heritage, to take account of Natural England, and of course the World Heritage Site Steering Group, and all other representations that will be made to the planning inspector as part of the planning process. Natural England has made representations about the effect of the proposals on the natural beauty of the coast, and English Heritage have also considered the effect of the setting of the wind farm on listed buildings and scheduled ancient monuments. Though it is important to stress that the Jurassic Coast is a World Heritage Site not on the basis of its natural setting, but on the basis of its unique geological interest. Of course, in addition to the World Heritage Site, there are 2 areas of outstanding natural beauty and 2 stretches of heritage coast. The need to protect the natural beauty of these areas and the effect of the wind farm on these will be considered as part of the planning process, as indeed will be the cultural heritage. And all representations that I've referred to are publicly available, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the Planning Inspector's website. Let me also touch briefly on the UK Marine Policy Statement, which is the framework for preparing marine plans and taking decisions which affect the marine environment. And that's required by the Marine and Coastal Access Act 2009. The Marine Policy Statement identifies social, economic and environmental factors that should be considered in the preparation of marine plans, including seascape. In this case, the proposal is classed as a major infrastructure proposal under the terms of the Planning Act, and its determination is subject to the Overarching Energy National Policy Statement and the Renewable Energy Infrastructure National Policy Statement. So the planning inspector has to assess the wind farm proposal in relation to those provisions and under the National Planning Policy Framework and other relevant planning policies. It is important to stress, Madam Deputy Speaker, quite rightly, that heritage protection policies, nature conservation policies are reflected in that guidance, and that includes recognition that heritage assets can be affected by offshore wind farm development, either by the direct physical siting or by the indirect impact on the marine environment. It includes a presumption in favour of the conservation of designated heritage assets. The more significant the heritage asset, the greater the presumption in favour of conservation, and the setting of heritage assets can contribute to that significance. National planning policy is clear. Applications for renewable energy schemes should be approved only if the impact on the local environment is or can be made acceptable, and the guidance states that local concerns should be listened to. I have to say that it may be appropriate at this point to talk about the environmental impact assessment that was put through. Again, it is my understanding that it is normal practice for the developer to pay for the independent for the environmental impact assessment, but that environmental impact assessment is still an independent environmental impact assessment. It is not the job of DCMS or indeed any other government department, as far as I'm aware, to pay for that impact assessment or to commission another impact assessment that has not been commissioned or, I think more accurately, paid for effectively by the developer. But there is no suggestion that that impact assessment is not independent, although my honourable friend has made his point effectively. I thought that might provoke an intervention, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I'm incredulous that the Minister says that. If Navitus Bay have paid for this assessment, how on earth can it be independent?
As far as I'm aware, and I'm not the Planning Minister, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is normal practice for the developer to pay for the independent assessment, but that independent assessment is still independent and effectively at arm's length from the developer. But in any event, the Planning Inspectorate has received many representations. They will convene a preliminary meeting where the process for consideration of the application will be set out and questions about it considered. And the Inspectorate has 6 months to carry out its investigation of the application, which will be undertaken by way of hearings and consideration of written representations. And they will give consideration to all important and relevant matters that have been brought to their attention, and they will report and make a recommendation to the Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change. Now, my honourable friend made a number of points to me. First of all, he suggested that I follow the example of the French, and my honourable friend should be aware that that is something I try to do on many occasions, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm perhaps one of the people in the chamber who has some admiration for the French in general, though not necessarily for their particular government or government policies. The case of Mont Saint-Michel was a unique, each case is a unique case in terms of considering a World Heritage Site, and I think it is impossible simply to read across, because one World Heritage Site involved an offshore wind farm and another World Heritage Site involves an offshore wind farm, that the two cases are identical. But it is a useful reminder from my honourable friend of the power that UNESCO has and the need for us to be vigilant about World Heritage Sites. And indeed, English Heritage, which has advised us on this, has advised me on World Heritage Sites in the past, and I wrote, for example, to oppose the development of Elizabeth House across the river because of its setting on this august building, and indeed English Heritage took the government to court and judicially reviewed the planning minister, which didn't make him particularly happy, but it does show that English Heritage is prepared to make a stand where it has a genuine view that the World Heritage Site is under threat. Unfortunately, that is not, fortunately from the perspective of my honourable friends, that is not currently English Heritage's position, where they think that their current advice is that the impact of the offshore wind farm would not have an undue adverse effect. But I do want to stress, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I have heard the points made by my honourable friend, and I think if I was in his position I would be making very similar points. I'm not across the detail in terms of the specific planning application, in the sense of could the wind farm be moved to a different part of the zones that have been designated by the Crown Estate, but certainly I would encourage him to enter negotiations with the Crown Estate and with the developers to see whether the wind farm could be moved, because although the process is of course independent and a quasi-judicial process, and although there are objective considerations to be taken into account in terms of the designation of the World Heritage Site, common sense and simple corporate responsibility would surely dictate that Navitus developers would sit down with my august friends and discuss what possible alternatives there could be. Of course I give way to my honourable friend.
Let's give way for a second time. The reason that this site was chosen is because it's the closest to land, and therefore it's all about money. The other sites are far further out and will cost the company multi-millions pounds more. There's no way, whatever negotiation we enter, they're going to change their minds.
I hear what my honourable friend says, and I suspect that, as I say, I'm not close to the planning application itself in terms of the technical considerations that are being undertaken by Navitus, and clearly money would be a factor in terms of the return on capital that they hope to achieve. But the Crown Estate is the landlord, as I understand it, and again the Crown Estate should be encouraged, and I hope will enter a dialogue with my honourable friends who represent their constituents so ably on this matter, and indeed represent the nation's interests so ably on this matter.
Will my honourable friend give way?
Of course I will give way to my honourable friend.
Of course, my honourable friend will know that the Crown Estate only gets money for developments within the 12-mile limit, and therefore if this was pushed beyond the 12-mile limit they wouldn't get any money for it. That's why they're not in favour of it.
The Crown Estate is free, as it were, to grant planning permission to individual developments, and I'm sure the Crown Estate would take into account its wider responsibility in terms of its relationship with local communities and stakeholders in terms of how it wishes to develop its own estate. And again, I think it should sit down with my honourable friends and local stakeholders and discuss the merits or otherwise of this proposal. But I think to return to the role of DCMS and my role, as I hope I've emphasised, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are not shy in coming forward where we think a World Heritage Site is under threat, even if it involves effectively disagreeing with colleagues in other departments, because we put the interests of World Heritage Sites first. And as things stand at the moment, in terms of the professional advice that is effectively given, at the moment English Heritage and English Nature, while they have, as I understand it, some concerns about the impact of the setting on some historic buildings, do not state in their advice that the current proposal for the offshore...
Order. The House stands adjourned.